Dad, I took the test. I'm pregnant with your child.
What?
I want to tell Mom.
No. You won't tell anyone.
She deserves to know.
I said no.
I can't keep this secret anymore.
If you do, I'll kill you. How could she be pregnant with her own father's child? Imagine standing by a window, watching the sun's warm glow slowly fade behind the bustling streets of Sao Paulo. The world outside moves at a fast pace, while inside, life feels like it's frozen in time. You're 17 years old, with big dreams of becoming a dancer, yet something inside you feels heavy, as if the world you once knew is slowly changing in ways you can't understand. This is where Isabella finds herself. Isabella, a bright and lively teenager, was full of life and energy. With her thick, dark hair and wide brown eyes, she was a natural beauty, full of potential. Dance was her escape, her chance to leave behind the struggles of daily life, if only for a moment. She spent hours practicing, imagining herself on grand stages, dancing gracefully and freely. But her dreams were now clouded by something much darker. Isabella lived in a small, humble house with her mother, Camila. Camila, a hard-working nurse, was always on the go, working long night shifts to support them both. She was dedicated and loving, giving everything she had to ensure Isabella had a good life. But the truth was, Camila couldn't be there all the time. She didn't see the subtle changes in the house, the things happening right under her nose. Then there was Ricardo, Isabella's stepfather. At first, he seemed like the perfect addition to their family, a charming, good-natured man who got along with everyone. But there was a side to Ricardo that only Isabella started to notice, one that made her feel uneasy, though she couldn't yet find the words to explain it. At first glance, everything appeared normal. Isabella went to school, laughed with her friends, and Camila did her best to juggle the demands of work and home life. Ricardo was the ideal stepfather, kind, helpful, and attentive. But beneath this image, Isabella felt a growing discomfort. She began to notice the subtle signs, the way Ricardo would look at her, his gaze lasting a little too long, the tension in the room when they were alone. It wasn't just her imagination. There was something wrong that made her nervous, and the more she tried to ignore it, the more it felt like it was suffocating her. When Camila wasn't around, Ricardo's attention toward Isabella grew more noticeable. At first, it was just small acts, compliments, gifts, a few extra moments of his time. He would tell her how beautiful she was, how talented, how much potential she had. Isabella had always craved attention, especially from her mother, who was often absent. So when Ricardo started to pay her attention, it felt good at first. She began to enjoy the little moments they shared, the conversations, the laughter, the gifts. But slowly, this attention became something else. Ricardo would go out of his way to buy her new clothes, jewelry, and treats for no reason. When Camila worked late, he would take her out for dinner or share private moments. At first, Isabella thought it was harmless, he was just trying to bond with her, right? But as the days went by, things started to feel different. The lines between stepfather and daughter began to blur, and Isabella couldn't deny that something wasn't right. The compliments started to feel less innocent, the gestures more loaded with meaning. Ricardo would sit too close to her, and touch her arm too long. He told her how much he cared about her, how beautiful she was in ways that made her skin crawl. Isabella didn't know what to do with these feelings. She didn't know how to stop it and didn't know how to tell her mother. As the days turned into weeks, Isabella's world became more and more confusing. She was living in a world of secrets, constantly battling with herself over what was happening. She couldn't bring herself to tell Camila what was going on. How could she? She feared it would tear their family apart, and she didn't want to be the one responsible for that. In the silence of her room, she would think about the future she once dreamed of: dancing, freedom, a life beyond the walls of her home. But it felt like that future was slipping further and further away. Her heart told her something was wrong, but her mind couldn't understand it. For weeks, Isabella had been feeling off. At first, she thought it was just stress from school and her dance practice. But as time passed, the signs became too clear to ignore. She felt nauseous every morning, tired even after a whole night's sleep, and her periods were late, something that had never happened before. One evening, after another day of feeling sick, Isabella couldn't push the thoughts away. She needed answers. She went to the pharmacy, bought a pregnancy test, and rushed home. Her hands shook as she took the test in the bathroom, staring at the small plastic stick. When she finally looked at the result, her world stopped. The 2 pink lines were clear. She was pregnant. The shock hit her hard. She stared at the test, unsure of what to feel. Her mind raced with confusion and fear. How could this have happened? What would she do? How would she tell her mother? She couldn't keep this secret much longer. Isabella knew she had to tell someone. The first person she thought of was Ricardo. Even though she had started to feel uncomfortable around him, he was still her stepfather. She believed that he would be the one to help her and support her through this mess. She found him sitting in the living room, watching TV. He didn't look up when she walked in, but she could feel his presence. Isabella's nerves made her voice tremble as she spoke. "Ricardo, I need to talk to you." He turned to face her, his eyes bright but not entirely warm. "What is it, Isabella?" With a deep breath, she gathered her courage. I'm pregnant." Her voice was small, barely above a whisper. "I don't know what to do." Ricardo's expression immediately changed. He stood up from the couch, his face hardening. Instead of the support she was hoping for, he became angry and panicked. "No," he said sharply, "this can't be happening. We can't let anyone know." His voice was low, almost threatening. "You can't tell your mother. If this gets out, everything will be ruined." Isabella was shocked. She thought Ricardo would comfort her, that he would help her find a solution. But instead, he was furious. He told her that they had to keep the pregnancy a secret, no one could know. "You need to keep this quiet, Isabella," Ricardo continued, his voice rising. "If your mother finds out, she'll never forgive you. We can't let this destroy our family." Before continuing, if you've enjoyed the video so far, please like it and subscribe to our channel. Your support means everything to us. Ricardo stepped closer to her, his presence suffocating. "If you tell anyone or your mother, I will make sure you regret it. Do you understand?" His voice was cold, the warmth of a stepfather replaced with something much darker. After the conversation with Ricardo, Isabella felt completely alone. She didn't know what to do or who to turn to. Every time she thought about telling her mother, she could hear his warning in her mind. "Don't say a word. No one can know." The weight of the secret pressed down on her every day. She couldn't sleep, couldn't focus on her schoolwork, couldn't even enjoy her dance practice. It felt like the world around her was closing in. She had to tell Camila. She had to find the strength to reveal the truth, no matter the consequences. Isabella knew the moment was coming, when she would have to face her mother and admit everything. But each day that passed, her anxiety grew. Ricardo's behavior became more controlling and more sinister. He monitored her every move, ensuring she didn't talk to anyone, especially Camila. Tension built in the house, and Isabella felt it in every room. When Camila was home, the tension was still there, but more subtle. She noticed Isabella was quieter and more withdrawn but couldn't understand why. With every passing day, the tension grew. Isabella's anxiety became harder to hide, and Ricardo's behavior grew more erratic. He would follow her around the house, watch her every move, and ensure she didn't try to reach out to anyone. The days stretched on, and Isabella felt herself losing control. The truth, the whole truth, was waiting to be told. And soon, she would have to decide whether to tell her mother and risk everything or to stay silent and let the lie consume her. It was late at night when Camila came home from her shift at the hospital. She was tired, but she could feel something was wrong when she walked in the door. The house was quiet, too quiet. Isabella was sitting in the living room, her face pale and anxious. She had been holding her emotions in for so long, but now, she could no longer keep her pain and fear hidden. She had decided that tonight was the night she would finally tell her mother the truth. "Mom, I need to talk to you," Isabella said, her voice trembling. She stood up slowly, clutching her hands together. Camila looked at her daughter with concern. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" Isabella hesitated, but then she spoke. I need to tell you something. It's about Ricardo and what's been happening between us." She took a deep breath and continued, "I'm pregnant, Mom. I'm pregnant, and it's his baby." Camila froze, unable to comprehend what she had just heard. Her eyes widened in shock. "What? What do you mean, Isabella?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Before Isabella could explain further, the door to the living room flew open with a loud bang. Ricardo stood there, his face twisted with rage. He had overheard everything. "How dare you?" he yelled, his voice filled with fury. "How could you tell her this? I told you to keep your mouth shut." Isabella stepped back, terrified by the sight of Ricardo's anger. She had hoped that, in telling the truth, her mother would protect her, but now everything felt like it was going out of control. "You don't get to say anything," Ricardo shouted at Isabella. "I've tried to protect you, but now you've ruined everything." Before anyone could react, Ricardo charged at Isabella, grabbing her by the arm and shoving her back onto the couch. "You should have kept quiet, Isabella," he screamed. Ricardo was no longer the charming, friendly stepfather he had once been. In that moment, he was a stranger, a man filled with violence and hatred. His anger consumed him, and he became violent, throwing punches at Isabella. She was stunned, unable to process what was happening. Her body screamed in pain as he continued to lash out, determined to silence her. Isabella tried to protect herself but was too weak and terrified to fight back. Every punch, every slap felt like it was breaking her from the inside out. She felt helpless as if there was no way out. Amid the chaos, Camila finally snapped out of her shock. She rushed toward her daughter, shouting Ricardo's name in disbelief. "Stop! Stop it! What is wrong with you?" Ricardo turned to Camila, his face twisted with rage. "Stay out of this, Camila. This is between me and her," he snarled. But Camila wasn't going to let him hurt her daughter any longer. Driven by the powerful instinct to protect her child, she grabbed a nearby lamp and swung it at Ricardo, hitting him on the arm. Ricardo growled in anger and tried to push Camila away, but she held on, refusing to back down. The house became a battlefield. The sound of their struggle filled the room as furniture was knocked over and the walls seemed to shake with the intensity of their fight. Camila's heart pounded in her chest as she fought to save Isabella from the monster that Ricardo had become. Her own body ached from the effort, but she couldn't stop. She couldn't let him win. Through the chaos, Camila managed to get a brief hold of Ricardo. She pushed him back long enough to grab her phone and call for help. "Please, someone help us. He's attacking my daughter," she screamed into the phone. The sound of sirens filled the night air as the police arrived at the house. The officers rushed in, guns drawn, and quickly took control of the situation. Ricardo, still boiling with rage, tried to resist, but he was no match for the trained officers. They pinned him to the floor, handcuffing him and arresting him on the spot. As the officers led Ricardo out of the house, Isabella collapsed in her mother's arms, exhausted and bruised but alive. Camila held her tightly. "You're safe now, Isabella." "It's over," she whispered. Isabella could barely understand what had just happened. Her body hurt, but the worst pain was the emotional toll it had taken on her. She had trusted Ricardo, loved him, and he had betrayed her most horrifically. But now, it was over. He was gone. And she was free. Isabella was rushed to the hospital, her body bruised and battered from the attack. Doctors worked quickly to treat her injuries, but the emotional scars would take longer to heal. Camila stayed by her side the entire time, never leaving her daughter's side. Though Camila was devastated by what had happened, she knew her daughter was strong, and they would get through this together. As Isabella lay in the hospital bed, she realized that she had been through something terrible, something no one should ever have to experience. But she also knew that her mother's love had saved her. The news of Ricardo's arrest spread quickly through their community. The quiet, seemingly perfect family was now the subject of shock and scandal. Ricardo faced serious charges: assault, statutory rape, and attempted murder. The trial became a public spectacle, with the details of his actions laid bare for everyone to see. It was hard for people to believe that the man they had once trusted, the charming stepfather and neighbor, could have committed such horrifying crimes. Camila and Isabella were left to face the fallout from the revelations. Some people in their community supported them, offering sympathy and comfort, while others, shocked and confused, reacted with judgment. Isabella, especially, felt the weight of judgment. She wondered if people saw her as just another victim or if they saw her as something more. Could they ever look at her the same way again? Camila, too, struggled. She blamed herself for not recognizing the warning signs sooner, for not protecting Isabella from the man she had trusted so much. The healing journey was long and painful. For Isabella, every day was a struggle. She had been through something unimaginable, and even though the physical wounds had healed, the emotional scars ran deep. She found herself reliving the past in nightmares, flashes of Ricardo's anger haunting her when she least expected it. Therapy sessions became a lifeline, and over time, Isabella learned to speak about her pain. But healing wasn't linear. Some days were better than others, and some days, the weight of everything seemed almost too much to carry. For Camila, the road to healing was equally tricky. She felt a constant sense of guilt. How had she not seen the changes in Ricardo? How had she allowed him to manipulate and hurt her daughter for so long? There were moments when she felt lost in self-blame, questioning her every decision. But she knew she had to keep going, for Isabella. She couldn't undo the past, but she could be there for her daughter in the present. And that was all that mattered. Together, they began to rebuild. The first few weeks after the trial were filled with silence, with both too weak to speak. But in time, they found comfort in each other's presence. The bond between mother and daughter grew stronger each day, built on the shared survival experience. They learned to trust each other again, to find hope even when it seemed distant. Months passed, and Isabella gave birth to her baby. The moment was bittersweet. On one hand, the child was a reminder of everything she had been through. But on the other hand, the baby was a symbol of her strength and resilience. Isabella had survived and was now bringing new life into the world. It was a difficult journey, filled with emotional and physical challenges, but she was determined to be a good mother. For Camila, the birth of her grandchild was a moment of acceptance. She had never imagined she would be here, standing beside her daughter, supporting her through becoming a mother. But she was determined to make the best of it. Camila embraced the child with love and care, knowing that the baby's arrival meant a new chapter for them all. For Isabella, the baby was a new beginning, a chance to start fresh. The child wasn't a reminder of the past, but a ray of hope for the future. She vowed to protect her baby and give them the love and care she had been denied. Isabella and Camila stood side by side, looking out at the rising sun. The sky was painted with soft hues of pink and orange, symbolizing the beginning of a new day, a new chapter in their lives. The past was always there, in the back of their minds, but they had survived. They had come through the darkness, now, the light was ahead. The road to healing was far from over, but they were no longer alone. Camila and Isabella had each other. With that, they knew they could face whatever came next. The journey was long, but it had brought them closer together, and now, they were ready to embrace whatever the future held. The sunrise wasn't just the start of a new day, it was a sign of the hope and strength that had carried them this far. Together, they would rebuild their lives, one step at a time.